Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us all at this evening's financial aid night. My name is Sean O'Brien. I am the Director of Guidance here at the the East Williston Union Free School District. And this is a night that we like to put on in guidance every year for the parents of seniors, just to give them a little bit of a better idea as to what they can expect from the financial aid process, which for many of us is that sort of unknown when it comes to the college process. The idea as to what schools are maybe safety targets and reaches at this point in the process is a little bit more clear to us. The understanding of what to do with sending our SATs and ACT scores is really something that most parents are comfortable with. But then we find in the guidance world that we get into that financial aid piece of things, and it's that monster under the bed that parents are still a little bit apprehensive about, especially those parents who it's their maybe first or even second child going through. So this is an evening that really gives us an opportunity to shine a light on that monster under the bed, so to speak, and kind of take some of the scariness away from it. And this evening, we're joined by Mr. Gene Rogers, who is the Senior Financial Aid Advisor from Molloy College. Gene is someone that I've worked with in a number of different school districts that I've been in now to help kind of provide parents and families with his information and expertise as to the entire financial aid process. So I'm not going to bore you. You've all heard enough from me so far throughout the course of this year about the college application process. Gene is really the person we're here to hear from. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping, a few reminders. November 1st at 7 p.m. will be our Naviance workshop for parents. Those of you who may have questions about Naviance, do feel free to drop by for that. In addition, just encourage your seniors, if they have not done so already, just to make sure they're following up with their counselor to make sure they're dropping off their application processing form so we can start to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row to send those applications out. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Gene Rogers. Gene, take it away.
All right. Good evening, folks. Just want to thank Mr. O'Brien for the invitation. I definitely, enjoy kind of passing information around, about the financial aid process. Hopefully, by the end of this, you get some helpful tips, and navigating can be a little anxiety-inducing, and I'll hope to eliminate a bit of that. So I'm going to present a PowerPoint. I did mention, I don't know if the PowerPoint's going to be kind of hosted on the school website. Certainly that's fine. So if just to reference that, back to the school district there, that's perfectly fine. I did just put my contact information into the chat. I'm not sure if that's viewable by everyone, but I'll repeat it. I'm just going to pull my PowerPoint up, and we'll get going here. Let me just make sure I can do that. All right. Hopefully my PowerPoint is up and viewable. Is that
Yep, we've got it. You're up.
Perfect. All right. So let's kind of get going. Before I begin, and just a little kind of history of me. I've spent the last 16 years at Molloy College, and it's been a kind of great place for me for the past 16 years. A lot of growth at Molloy in those number of years. 3 academic buildings, 3 dorms, but we're still a relatively small school. About just under 5,000 students, Division II sports, big majors, nursing, education, close by Rockville Center. But, just some perspective of where I've been spending the last 16 years. Great experience, and good things have happened, and we plan for it to continue to happen. But a little more just about myself. I did spend a few years down south in Nashville at Vanderbilt University, and I also, prior to that, NYIT right in Old Westbury. So I bring that up because financial aid for different institutions. There are a lot of consistencies, but there are some different nuances to different institutions depending on their resources. And I'll be sharing that information to you as I kind of go through Financial Aid 101. So let's get that going with the presentation. And I'll start with terminology. When you begin the process and start receiving financial aid information from respected colleges, you'll get financial aid offer letters, award letters that will contain different components of aid, and they'll be labeled as gift aid and self-help aid. Gift aid is really free money, grand scholarships that are offered by the institution, from the federal government, from the state agencies, but money that doesn't have to be paid back. Then you have self-help, which there is some skin in the game, paying back loans, employment opportunities. But when you receive these financial aid offers, hopefully you'll be getting more of the gift aid than self-help, but obviously that's all a part of it. I also like to begin early with this sort of pie chart of where the aid is coming from, just understanding, where the big chunks of financial aid are coming from. If you see federal loans, and it's been that way for many, many years, is the biggest form of financial aid. But the next biggest part is from the college directly, from the college themselves. And that's really the takeaway here, that understanding that, okay, federal loans are the biggest chunk, but the next biggest is right from the college themselves. And hopefully by the end of this, you get some tips on how to get your hands on those dollars. Obviously, there's federal money, state money to make up the rest. But the next biggest chunk is colleges. And I kind of, going along those lines, I like to use this statistic where I hear from families, hey, based on my income, I'll speak to families. They say, is it even worth applying? And I always will encourage families to apply. You're filling out a form that doesn't cost anything. That's the FAFSA. There is another one. I'll talk about that momentarily. But the FAFSA is a free form. So if you file, there could be things out there that you may not be aware of. Now, this statistic, this slide here, talks about Molloy's costs. Now, Molloy's costs, the current year is about $30,000. Now, this is telling you that for the average freshman last year, they received a financial aid package of almost $20,000, and over $16,000 was grant money. So money that doesn't have to be paid back. So the takeaway is not being kind of jarred by the sticker price of the college, but the net price, what's actually out of pocket. And obviously our tuition's over $30,000, but the majority is paying considerably less. And, other colleges, have similar rewarding parameters. A great tool to utilize is something called the net price calculator. The net price calculator is found on every college's website on the financial aid page, but allows a family, a student, to plug in sort of estimates on their financial information, and then also on the academic side, and it allows you to get a ballpark idea of the financial aid offer. It is not 100%, but it gives you an idea, hey, is this going to be a college that's manageable? Is it affordable? So every college has this net price calculator tool on their website. If you can't find it, I would kind of reach out to the college directly. Where is the net price calculator? Work with it. It's a good tool just to say, hey, is college A manageable? Is it even a college we should even apply to? And this tool kind of allows you to kind of narrow that list a bit. And we find it very helpful and highly suggested to use. Okay, so really, this is 80% of what I'm going to be talking about. What is FAFSA? Contrary to what you may have heard, it does not stand for the free application for stress and anxiety. It stands for the free application for federal student aid. A couple other little lighthearted things. I look forward to filling out the FAFSA, said no one ever. So certainly we understand it's not something that's high on the list of things people look forward to, but it may not be fun, but it's necessary. So what is it? The free application for federal student aid. It is a form that needs to be done each and every year. So for the interest of this evening, I'm kind of thinking that I'm going to be speaking to mostly parents of high school seniors. I don't know if there's some juniors on it, but for the interest of tonight, we'll be focusing in on the current high school senior that would be looking to apply to college starting September of 22. So you would be filling out the FAFSA for the 22-23 academic year. Something that has to be done each and every year, but for the current high school senior, they would be filling out the 22-23 FAFSA, which launches every October 1. So this past few weeks ago, October 1st, that was the launch date of the 22-23 FAFSA. The 23-24 FAFSA will launch next October. Every October, that's when FAFSA launches, and that's when you would begin the process. So for seniors, it's out there. It's kind of ready to go. In order to fill out the FAFSA, there'll be information that you'll need to have sort of at the ready. I have some bullets here. So for the 22-23 FAFSA, available this past October 1, you'll be using 2020 tax information to fill out the form. It is the most recent information that's available. No one has their 21 taxes done. So 2020 is the most recent, and that's what FAFSA requires. We do have some juniors. You'll be doing this next year using 2021 tax information to complete it. In order to fill out the FAFSA, like any other sort of online company, so forth, that you have to sort of access your bank, so forth, you need to create a username and a password, and they call it the FSA ID. So the student requires an FSA ID, and one parent requires an FSA ID. This is to complete the student's FAFSA. Student needs an FSA ID. One parent needs an FSA ID. If we have a traditional household, we got mom and dad and the student. Mom or dad needs to set up an FSA ID along with the student. If both parents want one, that's fine, but only one, it's necessary. And really for the parent, it is just allowing the parent to electronically sign the student's FAFSA. So one FAFSA for the student, two FSA IDs, student, parent. Just want to clear that. If we do have some parents on the call that have an FSA ID for an older child, obviously that's still good as long as it's been active for the past year and a half, and it can be reset as well. Some changes for the 21-22 year that went into effect. In the past, students were asked about selective service status. Males between 18 and 25 must register for selective service. FAFSA would have a question about it. They still have the question. In the past, we would have to verify that students did sign up with selective service. Now we do not. So it does not hold up any processing. Question's still there. It's still the law. It's still a requirement for males to register, but it will not hold up financial aid. Also, there's questions about drug convictions. If students have drug convictions, that's no longer there. And also reduced verification. And I'll be talking about verification throughout the course, but it's more or less where FAFSA requires the school to double check information that was provided on FAFSA. And we found that a lot of that has been reduced the current year and into the next. Then down the road for even next year and beyond, how current family members, if there's older siblings attending college at the same time as a younger sibling, how that affects financial aid eligibility, and some of the terminology is planning to be updated. It hasn't happened yet, but it may down the road. Okay, you can also do FAFSA on your phone. The My Student Aid app you can get on Android and iPhone. My suggestion is, if possible, do the FAFSA on a desktop, on a laptop, if possible. You can do it on the phone. It's just doesn't kind of show you as much information that the desktop laptop does. So certainly download it. You can check status. Good thing just to kind of see the progress of the form. That's fine. But to actually do it, a little bit easier to do it in my opinion, on desktop and laptop. I've had students, families that have done it and they're happy with it, but just my opinion, but just wanted to make sure you knew it was available. Okay, one of the most important slides in the presentation is making sure when FAFSA gets filled out that the student's name, social, date of birth are correct when it's submitted. Those are the biggest probably headaches that aid administrators have correcting the information. I'm working on one right now here. So it is something that delays just the processing of a student's financial aid. So I always kind of say if you have the student's social security card, whatever his name is, if he goes by a nickname, use the name on the social security card, date of birth, and the correct social security number will put him on the right path to get his financial aid sooner than later. All right, so other things that you'll need. You will need, obviously, the tax data from 2020 from student and parent, just some other social security card, driver's license, things like that. Also, untaxed income information, bank statements. Now, a big thing to be mindful of, as I mentioned, tax information goes back to 2020. Other financial information, how much money you have in the bank, investments, that is the day you file the form. So you'll be looking at your current bank information when you file FAFSA. Tax information, a couple years ago, current bank information, untaxed income, that's day you file. Also, if you own a business that employs less than 100 people, FAFSA is not interested in that. So small business owners, doesn't apply to FAFSA. And then that last little bullet there, college codes, you can list up to 10 different colleges on the FAFSA initially, and that information will go out to the respective colleges. Student doesn't have to be accepted at those institutions to just list them on FAFSA. Now, they will not receive a financial aid package until they've been accepted, but they're not required to just include them on FAFSA. Now, if you have more than 10 colleges, you have to submit the FAFSA, wait 3 to 5 days, go back in, and then delete a few off of there to add additional. The other colleges that you may be deleting, as long as they get that initial transaction, they got it, and then you can resend to others. All right, school deadlines. You know, unfortunately, I'm a big Met fan, and they were terrible this year. So don't drop the ball like they did. Check with colleges directly about their own school deadline. Now, I mentioned October 1 is the launch date for FAFSA. Every college will say, well, we want FAFSA in by this date to begin awarding. And those dates may be, I think the earliest I've seen for some of the more select schools, the Ivy Leagues, is like mid-November. So still sort of a month out. And most are more at the beginning of 22, January, February. But definitely important, check with the institution your son or daughter is applying to, or yourself. When do you want FAFSA? A lot of times it's on the school's website. I was just kind of looking at, I think, Villanova, or I was looking at Notre Dame, and mid-November was the earliest that they would be requesting that information for some of the more select schools out there. Okay, so what really drives the bus in terms of financial aid eligibility? What are they looking at? Kind of what are things that really affect where things may land for you? So primary income from both student and parent, savings from both student and parent, investments, I'll have more on that in a second. Real estate, not your home, I'll have more of that in a second. And then household size, so who lives with you? If there's maybe older siblings that maybe went off to college and then came back, they could be counted in the household size if parents provide more than half of their support. That's really the key piece to that, and it's right in the definitions on FAFSA. Household size is parents, other younger siblings, and so forth, and then other people that the parent is providing more than half their support. So there could be maybe grandparents, maybe they're living in the household. So the larger the household size, the more eligibility that may be, that may factor in. Obviously, smaller the household size, less. Big important question. Be mindful of how that is factored and listed and so forth. But the key thing is if parent provides more than half of the other individual's support. All right, digging deeper into parents' information. So parents' income reported. Parents' asset reported with the exception of home value. So your primary residence does not get asked about on the FAFSA at all. So here we are, you live on Long Island, where home value is $500,000, that asset goes nowhere on FAFSA. So it is not, hurting you one bit in terms of how it impacts financial aid eligibility. Now, on the flip side, obviously, they're not asking about your mortgage and so forth, but it is a protection that is a good thing for the most part. Also, traditional retirement savings do not get asked about on FAFSA. And that means like a 401k, a 403b, any traditional retirement accounts that are being, kind of paid into, the total value of that is not asked for on FAFSA. And then the third bullet here, generally speaking, the first $45,000 of parent savings that do count get protected. So if you're in a position where you have $100,000 in a savings account or investment, the FAFSA is going to kind of take off $45,000 right off the top. Now you put in whatever's there and let FAFSA sort of shield what they're going to shield, but they don't. There is some protections that they put down there for families that have been in a position to save. Assessed at 5.64. So what that means is, for every $100 the parent has in an account that counts, FAFSA is really expecting them to kick in $5, $6 towards the student's education. Now, parents will ask me about the student savings. Now, that is assessed at about 20%. And there's no protections. They're not shielding the first 45,000. So for the student's savings, it's obviously FAFSA is expecting them to contribute a larger share of those dollars. And that last bullet is business value, less than 100 employees. Business value does not count. All right, I think I mentioned this a little bit, but 529s. 529 is very popular. Families may have that. That always counts as a parent's asset, even if it's in the child's name. So that's a good thing. It's assessed at that 5.64 as opposed to 20. Other relatives do not count on FAFSA. If it's grandparent, doesn't get listed on FAFSA. Uncle doesn't get listed on FAFSA. But if it's the child, it gets listed as the parent's asset. If it's the parent, it gets listed as the parent's asset. All right. Okay, what counts and what does not? Questions kind of come up in terms of, I'll just kind of grab at a few things here. Trust funds always count, even if the student doesn't have access to them currently. The only exceptions, if you have some court documents saying that this trust has to be used for this exclusively, that may be something you can share with the college directly and let them know. But generally, trusts count. Life insurance policies do not. Annuities do not. And this is all on FAFSA, so you can kind of reference that if you are kind of puzzled by one of the questions. But many things do not, but obviously the more traditional things do. How does child support factor into FAFSA? Child support paid is included. If parent or step-parent pays child support, info is included on FAFSA. Child support received, all children in household is included. There's a special section, you just provide that data. Okay, what qualifies as independent on FAFSA? I have one slide here just to kind of highlight questions. lot of times juniors and seniors in college, they'll come to me and say, hey, I moved out of mom and dad's house. I should be considered independent. FAFSA has their specific requirements, and basically it's age. Once the student's over 24, they're independent. If they are married, they are independent. If they have children they support, they are independent. If they are a veteran of the armed forces, they're independent. Nowhere does it ask, where does the student live? So the student can be moved out of mom and dad's house, but if they don't meet those conditions, then they are considered dependent, and then FAFSA requires parents' information. So very specific. Now, there are some exceptions, and if you look at the slide, in cases of homelessness, issues like that, and then if there is some other unique circumstance the student may be dealing with, that would be a conversation the student should have directly with the financial aid office at the college they're looking at. And there are instances where the college can override FAFSA and make that student independent, but it is rare, and it comes with a lot of hoops. So just wanted to kind of highlight that. Question about when the parent just simply refuses to provide their information. That does really tie the hands of the financial aid office, where, all we can do is offer a loan to the student. A lot of times when students are faced with that, we may even try to reach out to the parent and say, can we get that information from you? Because then that would allow the student and us to create a financial aid offer and move forward. But without it, it really does leave the student in a tough spot. Principles and needs analysis. So this comes right from FAFSA. To the extent they are able, parents have primary responsibility to pay for their dependent children's education. So if you reread that sentence, nowhere does it say willingness. So FAFSA is just measuring the parent's ability to help their son or daughter out for college. Students also have responsibility. And then the third bullet, probably one of the most important things, families should be evaluated in their present financial condition. So what that really means is you fill out the FAFSA, you get on the ball, you do it this month, next month. You start receiving financial aid offers usually in maybe March or April of next year. Maybe something has changed from the time you filled out the FAFSA to the time you received the financial aid offer. Maybe dad took a different job and he's making considerably less money. Happens, so forth. So what financial aid offices are able to do is something we just refer to as special circumstances. So something may have changed from the time you filled out the form to what's really going on currently with the family. Now, employment is the biggest one for sure. In instances like that, FAFSA does not have any place on FAFSA that allows you to manipulate the numbers and say, hey, even though the tax status says this, things are now different. Dad is making less money. Mom is making less money. What ends up happening, or what has to happen, is the student or the family has to reach out directly to the college and say, something is different. Please create a financial aid award based on what's happening now, not what was happening then. So as I mentioned, there's no place on FAFSA that allows you to go in and manipulate. You need to provide, in this case, filling out the 22-23 FAFSA, you're providing 2020 tax information. If you go through an appeal, then the college themselves may say, all right, here we are, March of 2021. Did you fill out your 21 tax return? Please provide us a copy of that. And then they will look at that tax return and may be able to modify and re-award, and maybe there's some additional dollars available. But the most important thing is just the student, the family must reach out directly to the college. And I would say you want to wait till you receive your initial financial aid package before you start reaching out to the college and appealing. You want to narrow that field. Maybe you got it down to like 3 colleges, because if you look to get the appeal, you're going to be pushing out data sending copies of tax returns, writing letters to, 8 colleges if you haven't narrowed the field. I usually say at least narrow it down to 3. Now, other special circumstances, medical expenses not covered by insurance, unusual dependent care expenses, one-time occurrence, which is a big thing. Maybe the family maybe inherited some money one year, and that one year is 2020, for argument's sake, and it inflated the family's adjusted gross income. That's a one-time occurrence. So that's a letter you can write to the financial aid office and say, hey, our income, showed X amount of dollars, and that's really not a normal year for us. Can you look at a different year? And in a lot of cases, they can, and that could modify the financial aid package. All right, so special circumstances, information you push out to the college and let them, they will share with you what the process is. Now, obviously, everything we've been dealing with tied to the pandemic, if loss of income, different things, it's really an appeal similar to the traditional appeal. And I would just say, write those letters to the college directly and share with them what's been going on. And if there's an avenue for them to make a modification, they certainly will, if possible. Okay, I mentioned on one of the earlier slides about a process called verification. When the FAFSA is filed, about 30% of the FAFSAs are selected for this verification process. And what it is the colleges then are basically being told that we have to double check the information that's on FAFSA. In order to do that, we have to get copies of tax returns from the students. We have to get some other institutional documents. So there is some back and forth, a bit more time consuming. When you're doing the FAFSA, at the point where they ask for you to provide the tax information, you will get offered a link that allows you to link the tax information right from IRS to FAFSA. This does 2 things. It kind of cuts down on any kind of issues with transposing numbers, and then the information just populates. And then, as I mentioned, the chance of verification in a lot of cases is reduced. It's not foolproof. We can still provide, we still may ask you information, but it does get cut down from what we see. So it could save time initially, and it could save time down the road. Now, you may not get an option depending on the way you filed, if you recently moved. So you may not, you may not be eligible. But if you are, we find it saves time, and it's definitely worth it. Okay, a little bit of math. Gonna take a drink of water here. Every college across the country uses this formula to determine financial need. So when we're constructing the financial aid package, every college, we're going to look at cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals financial need. Now, you may not know what that means, but I'll explain it. So every college has to come up with a cost of attendance, which it's on the left here. You have tuition and fees, which is a direct cost from the college. So for Molloy, give or take $30,000. Then you have books and supplies. Now, books and supplies can be a little bit of a variable. The student's major is business. The student's major is nursing. The supplies and the books may be a little bit different. So it's a variable. It's an estimate. Room and board, if the student is living on campus, it is going to be a direct cost from the college, so firm direct cost. But if the student's living at home with mom and dad, there is still an expense to that. It is not a direct cost to the college, but it costs some money for the student to live at home with mom and dad. So we have to assign a value to that. Then also transportation, same thing. Student's going back and forth, whether he's driving his car, whether he's taking the bus, there is a cost associated with that. And then the last, miscellaneous expenses, needs to buy clothes. And then every college has to come up with a total. Now, just to make math easy, for Molloy's sake, let's say it's about $45,000. So that includes all the direct costs, but then all those other estimates. So every college does that. And then after you submit FAFSA, FAFSA will give you a dollar amount that they say, this is what we feel the family can afford to send the student to college for that year. Whether you agree with that number is somewhat doesn't really matter. It is just the number they come up with, and they call it the expected family contribution, or the EFC. So we take the cost, we minus the contribution, and then we are left with a number. And that number is considered financial need. So when you hear about need-based types of aid, if the math kind of works for the student, there may be some eligibility of need-based aid. So I have a few more slides tied to that. So you have cost minus family contribution equals financial need. Every college uses this to determine need-based eligibility. So I have a couple of samples here. We have a private college, similar to Molloy, a little bit more expensive maybe, with a cost of about $50,000. The family contribution is $25,000. So let's say this student is a bright student, gets a $10,000 merit scholarship. Okay, he also plays baseball, and he's getting a $10,000 baseball scholarship. So he's getting $20,000 in merit scholarships based on his smarts and also his baseball skills. We have to plug that into the financial aid package. We plug that in, it meets need, but there's still $5,000 remaining. So the college can also offer a need-based grant up to $5,000 to meet the need. So getting merit money, getting some baseball money, but there's still some need-based eligibility. On the other side, we got let's say a SUNY with the cost considerably less, but the same family contribution, same family, same contribution. In this case, the student would be ineligible for any need-based. Now, he may get that merit scholarship, he may get the baseball scholarship, but no need-based just because the math. So understanding this, understanding if colleges, you may be applying to colleges that meet full need, but then institutions may not, just depending on their resources and so forth. I just got to, I was asked to kind of look at some colleges and some due dates and so forth. Some of the big college course, Notre Dame with a cost of over $78,000. And they're looking for FAFSA by February 15th. Boston College, big $66,000. They're looking for FAFSA for like early decision, November 1, but regular February 1st. Villanova, $74,000. And then a SUNY, Binghamton, which is considerably less. And, their FAFSA deadline is January 1st. So just throwing some kind of some colleges in the area and beyond. All right, so whose information goes on FAFSA? So we have traditional household, mom and dad. Mom's information, dad's information, student's information goes on FAFSA. Student lives with mom, mom is divorced from birth father. FAFSA only looks at where the student is living. So it's student and mom only. Student can have a great relationship with dad, but if mom and dad are separated, divorced, it is just the parent the student lives with. I kind of switched it up. Student lives with dad, dad is divorced from birth mom. It is student and dad only. And then the last one is the one that gets kind of the groans in some cases. Student lives with mom and mom is remarried. FAFSA asks for student, mom, and stepdad. So step parents' information is required on FAFSA. They are measuring household income. So stepdad's information is required. People ask, is there a solution to that? And I always say, stay dating. So hopefully trying to make a little light of things. So who is parent on FAFSA? All right, parent is biological parent, adoptive parent, step parent who is married to and residing with custodial parent. Who is not parent, other relatives. I hear from plenty of students and they live with grandparents, and grandparents are covering all the expenses. They are not considered parent on FAFSA unless they have legally adopted that child. So very clear cut with who is parent on FAFSA. Just a little more on that. There was a change over the last few years where if we do have two birth parents that do live under the same roof but never married, both their informations get included on FAFSA. So even though parents aren't married, but if they both live under the same roof, FAFSA is asking for both information. All right, everything I've been talking about, FAFSA, there is another form, and that other form is called the profile. It does dig deeper into the family circumstance. My suggestion is only if the college requires the profile form do you fill it out. So check with the institutions. Do you require profile? By all means, fill it out, because those institutions have a lot of their own money, and the only way you can get it is if you fill out the profile. It costs a few dollars to fill it out. They dig deeper, as I mentioned. They do ask about non-custodial parent. They ask about your home value. They ask about other investments. They really want to get a better sense and dig deeper into the family's finances before they start awarding their dollars. So only if they require it should you fill it out, and check with them directly when they want the information. Usually it lines up right with FAFSA. All right, a timeline on the process. You fill out FAFSA. Generally, once you hit submit, you get an instant email. No longer than a few hours, you should get the email saying it's been submitted. Student and the financial aid office at the respective schools will get the information. As I mentioned, students will not get awarded, packaged, offered anything until they've been accepted by the admissions office. Now, the FAFSA can be there and kind of at the ready, and I recommend that, but you will not start getting information from the financial aid office until the student has been accepted. Once they've been accepted, they have a certain amount of time to respond. And then in certain instances, you'll be asked to provide documentation like tax returns if they're selected for that verification process I mentioned. Okay, show me the money. So everything on the next slide is all about what makes up the package. I've been talking about in terms of the math and so forth, but what makes up the package? You got federal grants, you got state grants, you got money from the college directly, whether it's need-based grants, whether it's scholarships, loans, work study, outside scholarships, private alternative loans, all components of aid. Hopefully your offer letters, award letters will consist of more money from the top than the bottom, but most likely you'll see it all. So we'll start with scholarships. The admissions office at the different institutions are the decision makers in terms of merit scholarships based on grades, not a decision that comes from the financial aid office. It does route to the financial aid office and it becomes part of the aid offer. And as I mentioned in the math, it does meet that need. It's not determined by it, but it meets the need. So if there's still additional dollars based on that math, then colleges can award need-based money, which could be loans, it could be more grants, but decisions come from the admissions office on the merit scholarships. Big money goes to freshmen. So if the student's awarded a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 scholarship as an incoming freshman, in most cases, if they elect to go elsewhere and try to transfer back, generally those dollars are off the table or just greatly reduced. So as you're going through the decisions, understanding that generally the four-year colleges that are offering those scholarships, it will not be there if the student chooses to go elsewhere and then try to transfer back. Private sources of scholarships, definitely a couple of websites here. FastWeb, been around for a long time. I'm sure Mr. O'Brien's office has some scholarship literature and some recommendations on that as well. But I did want to highlight private sources. Maybe mom or dad works for a company that has a scholarship. Maybe your local church, library, just in the neighborhood. It may have some opportunities there. But the websites for sure. Sally Mae, the one at the bottom here, has a search engine right on their website. And these are, free to apply to. And they definitely target the incoming freshmen as an audience to apply to. Also to be aware of is there are folks out there that will if they're charging you money to apply, definitely a red flag. We don't want students applying and paying for a scholarship. A couple of kind of quotes we see on some of the literature: you've been selected by a group you never heard of, you're a finalist in a contest you never entered. So just to be mindful that there are some scholarship things that may not be on the up and up, and just to be mindful of that. Okay, the Pell Grant, big federal grant out there right now. The maximum Pell Grant just under $6,500. This is federal. Really doesn't run out. I don't encourage students to fill out the FAFSA too late, but if you did, Pell would still be sort of in play. There's another federal grant called SEOG. SEOG does run out, so by filling out the FAFSA as early as possible, you're going to put yourself in a position to be sort of first in line, and I would encourage families and students to do that. So Pell, then SEOG. Institutional grants, we mentioned admissions awards, scholarships based on grades, and if a student plays a musical instrument, athletic, then it's the coaches in the athletic department, it's the music directors, they make the decisions, then that information routes to the financial aid office. And if there's need-based money that can be awarded to sort of bridge that gap, as I mentioned, we do so then. TAP is a New York State grant, so if you're looking at a New York State school, public or private, certainly apply for TAP. It comes at the end of FAFSA. You'll get a link at the end of the FAFSA that says, we noticed you're a New York State resident, please apply for TAP. But that's for a New York State school, public or private. TAP only looks really at net taxable income of the family. If you look at the slide, less than $80,000, usually you'll qualify for something from TAP, not just the gross income, just net taxable. So net taxable is generally much less. So families should apply and kind of see, and it's a grant, doesn't have to be paid back. Also, folks, and not just kind of throwing information out there, in order to fill out FAFSA, you do have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. There are some students out there that do not meet conditions, and they fall into the DACA status. And over the last few years, there's been situations where they've been able to, based on meeting these conditions, apply for TAP money through New York State. They still can't do FAFSA, but they may be eligible for some TAP dollars. You can get the information through hesc.ny.gov/dream. Obviously, folks can't fill out FAFSA as long as they're a citizen or a permanent resident. But if they're not, the DACA path to the DREAM Act may be a way to go. All right, federal loans. Everyone qualifies for a federal loan if they do FAFSA. It is capped at $5,500 for freshmen, $6,500 for sophomore, $7,500 for junior and senior. But these are guaranteed loans. Right now, they're at 3.73, so fairly low interest rate, not based, no credit component to these. They're deferred while the student's in school, then they have 10, 20 years to pay these loans back once they graduate. But the big thing is understanding there's a cap, so families may not be able to borrow, or students may be able to borrow what they want or what they need. There is a loan that the parent can borrow called the PLUS loan that allows them to cover full cost, but the interest rate's a bit higher, considerably higher, and there is a credit component to it. So sometimes colleges may not mention the PLUS loan. It is available. You may just have to mention it yourself if you're interested. But it is an option that I just wanted to share all those options that are available. Start Here, Get There, good, helpful website run through the state. I volunteer quite often. We are having a virtual FAFSA completion event next month that it's free to everybody. You could jump on Start Here, Get There, and we're doing it over Zoom using breakout rooms. Families could jump on, and we have volunteers from across the state. So we did it last year. It was very, very successful. So just wanted to share that with you guys. And also everything we've been talking about tied to federal aid, you can find on studentaid.ed.gov. Real easy to understand language, everything about federal loans, the federal grants, anything federally that we've been talking about, you can find information here. This is that Sally Mae website for the scholarship search. Maybe a little updated. This was from last year, but good. I find I've been hearing good news from other students that have gotten some scholarships. So something to check out. Same website, Start Here, Get There again. Just wanted to kind of talk about there. Have some good videos on here, some other resources for outside scholarships, and just a helpful site to help you kind of navigate the process. And I think that is it. And those are my two kids that are always encouraging families to fill out the form and get that FAFSA in. So appreciate listening, and I'm going to stop my sharing here and get us back to main thing here. Let's see. Oh, okay. Am I done sharing?
Your
Okay.
screen is done. We've got you back.
All right. Awesome. All right.
And Gene, one question did come through in the chat, and I think you answered it, but I'll just read it out loud just to make sure that we bring clarity to it. One parent asked if they should file the FAFSA first, the CSS profile second, and the college application third, and if there was a particular order to submit them. You touched on it, but just to kind of bring that back around in case the person missed the message.
I would say, FAFSA and profile at the same time. Most of the colleges align deadlines the same time. So if they ask FAFSA by January 1, have the profile by January 1, or whatever the date is. Obviously, you have to, do one on a Monday, maybe do one on the Tuesday. And then you say college application in terms of admissions. If that, I would probably say, do that. That one should be first if I'm hearing the question right.
I would agree there. I would say that the college application should be first. And then once you know the schools and you finalized your list of schools, you can add them to the FAFSA and complete that next. And then, as you had said, that CSS profile, complete it if it's required. But if it's not required, best not to provide that information.
No. Yeah. And it costs you money.
Absolutely. Any other questions? And Gene, before we do open it up to questions, I do, as always, want to thank you for your time and your expertise. It's greatly appreciated. And I definitely want to connect with you offline a little bit just to get information about how our families might be able to make use of that virtual FAFSA completion.
Sure.
You and I have worked together to get those at a few other districts, and I'd definitely be happy to offer the virtual ones up to the families here that might make use of it. It is a great event. Any questions for Mr. Rogers while he's here? Any lingering questions? I know financial aid is always those things where those situations kind of creep into our mind, and we'd like to know. Do you pay taxes when you utilize 529 money? Is one of the questions that came through in the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. I'm not sure if that's really a financial aid question. I mean, 529s count as an asset on the FAFSA form. Just so it's an asset that counts on FAFSA, and you're using it. You're using a 529 to pay eventual college tuition. The tax implications of it. That's going to be more for your tax preparer than me. But it counts as an asset on the FAFSA. That's all I can kind of add to that.
And then another question that came through. What if someone forgot to declare something like a CD or a stock when they were completing their FAFSA?
Yeah. I mean, if you make an honest error, you made an honest error. Or what will, just to give you some kind of backup with that, when families get selected for verification, they need to then provide copies of tax information. And if that tax information, in the case of an investment, has some interest income or dividend income listed on the tax return, that's going to be something the aid administrator is going to be like, hey, we need to check this out. So, it depends. I mean, if you got a CD worth $1,000, it's probably not going to, kind of trigger too many questions there. But if it's, $100,000, it's, it can raise an eyebrow or two. So, and it comes back to verification. It comes back to do you get selected for verification? As I mentioned, it's a 70-30 thing. 30% of FAFSAs get picked. So if you don't fall into that and it's not a profile, because I will say the profile schools, usually 100% verification. So if they're asking you to fill out profile, they're going to check it all. But what I said, an honest, you forgot something. Yeah, okay, I forgot something. That happens. That happens. So there you go.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, thought the person was unmuting. All right. Well, Mr. Rogers, I'd really like to thank you again for your time. It's always a pleasure, and your time and talent is always certainly appreciated. We'll definitely share this PowerPoint up on the district website as well. And we will have a recording of your information that'll be shared out to parents for them to reference also. But thanks again. And we'll definitely talk about how I can share out that link with our families if they have any questions at that virtual completion event. That'd be great.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Gene. And thanks everyone else for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit in on this brief presentation, and everyone have a great evening. Take care.